I've been HIV positive for 17 years. I lived in San Francisco in the mid-'80s through the mid-'90s. Lived in the heart of the Castro district of San Francisco during the darkest days when the Bay Area Reporter newspaper every week would come out with pages of very small obituaries. It was a very, very tough time, but it was also a time of great activism and action. Out of the death that was around all of us, there was also a sense of life and vigor. I, at that point, had in the first 5 years not been directly impacted and not lost somebody directly. In 1992, my partner and I decided to leave San Francisco and move to New Hampshire to do a business venture, which now looking back, I realized was actually a geographic escape from what was going on in San Francisco. Because keep in mind at that time, with what was not only going on in San Francisco, but the hysteria and the fear that was happening across the country, there was not a lot of migration to San Francisco among young people, as it had been for generations, coming to San Francisco to discover themselves, to find freedom, to be part of the village that was the gay community. And the city was losing so many people on a daily basis and on a weekly basis, and so it became a very aged community very, very quickly. So we moved to New Hampshire, and I did a business and became involved also there in HIV and AIDS service, working for the New Hampshire AIDS Foundation in a board service, and became chair of the board in New Hampshire. And it was a different environment. We weren't doing outreach and providing information, education, and awareness to quote-unquote gay men. We were reaching out to men who have sex with men. And our outreach was not taking place in the bars or clubs. It was taking place in the rest stops of New Hampshire, because that's where the sexual activity was taking place. After a few years, I decided to return to San Francisco. And it was a very different time. Protease inhibitors had come on the scene. People were living and surviving. It wasn't like it was when I had left 4 or 5 years before, when death was all around. Skeletons were basically walking the street. Individuals that looked as though they were 70 or 80 years old, but the reality of it is they were 30 or 35 or 40 years old. And it was different. I then myself became infected in 2000, actually maybe 99. I became infected as a result of becoming an IV drug user with crystal meth. And that time not only did I become infected as a result of drug use and IV drug use, but after I was infected, there was a sense of being broken, and or that I was not any longer a good commodity, that I wouldn't be wanted or loved. And I began a trajectory of self-destructive behavior that lasted for about 3 or 4 years until I was blessed that I found my way out of that and have now been clean and sober for over 13 years. And am healthy today and on protease inhibitors. I also, as a result of both my drug addiction and my HIV, after I learned that I was HIV positive, I had 2 tattoos put on the left shoulder of my left shoulder, 2 Chinese symbols that symbolize perseverance and longevity. And I believe that that's harnessing the energy from life's events to become strong, gain strength, perspective, and wisdom, to be able to pass that on. And as I've come to learn in my own life as a result of walking this journey, this very tough, dark journey, and toward the light, that the only way and the best way for me to be able to get out of sometimes the dark despair is to be of service and help others. And I have been fortunate enough for the last 12 years to be working directly in AIDS service organizations. And today for the last 7.5 years, have been blessed to be the executive director of the National AIDS Memorial. And actually, ironically, I'm sitting today in Orlando, Florida, and I am filming this in the booth that is being staged at the National Hemophilia Conference. Because many don't understand and don't realize what also happened to the hemophilia community in the early years. As a result of the tainted blood supply, over 50% of the hemophilia community was lost to HIV and AIDS. That's the story of Ryan White, and actually she sat in this chair just a few minutes ago before me. I am finding here at this conference that there is so much that binds us together, whether hemophiliacs or gay men, as it relates to HIV and AIDS, and that although there is much water that has gone under the bridge between both of our communities, there was great animosity towards the gay community by the hemophilia community for tainting the blood supply. But we have been welcomed here with such open arms, and we, I believe, see that we are bound together by the common tragedy of AIDS. If I'm to look back at the single most influencing factor of the trajectory of my own life, it is AIDS. And I do look at it as, in many ways, a blessing in my life, because it has allowed me to find a core of spiritual centeredness that allows me to be of service to others. That's my choice. I can't undo whether HIV and AIDS came into the world. It did. Whether I'm positive or negative, I am positive. What I can do is I can take the energy that it has given me and try to harness it and move it in a positive direction and to be of service. And also to ensure that those that have died, and I've lost so many friends and lovers, that they did not die in vain, that their legacy and their death was for a reason, that we will always, as individuals and as a community, stand up for justice, humanity, and human rights. Because at the core of this disease is social injustice and lack of human rights. And so for those of you that are listening to this, I encourage you to ensure that your life has meaning, and that where you see injustice and where you see social need and where you see individuals that are struggling, that you reach out and you help them. Lastly, I'm infected with HIV and AIDS, but AIDS is not me. I've used AIDS and the virus as an opportunity to give me power and energy. So may you, those of you who are watching this and listening to this, may you find power and energy in your own life. Namaste.